screen here. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone to the first ever AAEEBL Shark Tank. We're super excited to have you here. We had our first dive this morning. It went swimmingly, and now we're going and entering our second dive this afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you might be. My name is Helen Chen. I am on the AAEEBL board and also a researcher at in the Designing Education Lab in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Stanford. And I'm delighted to be here today together with my colleague Gail Matthews-Denatali from Northeastern University, also AAEEBL board member, to welcome you to the first ever AAEEBL Shark Tank. So our plan for today then is, first of all, I'll go over some logistics, but before I do that, I would like to introduce you all to our sharks, our ePortfolio experts who we are so fortunate to have with us. The first is actually Jerry Hanley, who is the Executive Director of Merlot and Skills Commons, and also directs the Center for Usability and Design and Accessibility, and is a Professor Emeritus from Cal State University, Long Beach. Welcome, Jerry. Our second shark is actually Dr. John Edelson, Professor Emeritus from Cal State Monterey Bay, but also a co-founder of EPAC, the ePortfolio Community of Practice, and has been doing this for a long time, as I can personally attest to. Now, our third, honored guest is actually Allison Miller. She's the lead consultant of digital capability and also leads ePortfolios Australia, a professional network which aims to support the use of ePortfolios in Australia and beyond through professional development activities and the sharing of resources, ideas, and practice. We're so delighted to, AAEEBL is so delighted to be able to practice, to partner with Allison on several initiatives, and then also connect our community as well as the ePortfolios Australia community as well. And last but certainly not least is the very esteemed Dr. Eddie Watson. He's the Chief Information Officer and Associate Vice President for Quality, Pedagogy, and LEAP Initiatives in the Office of Quality, Curriculum, and Assessment at AACNU, and just a longstanding friend and colleague. He's also the one of the co-executive directors of the International Journal of ePortfolio as well. So welcome and thank you to all of our sharks here today. I want to go over briefly about some of the logistics of how things are going to work. And the whole event will actually be emceed by Gail. And here she is thinking you're going to need a bigger boat, especially with all the fun that we're having. We're going to have this today. So again, it's a 3-minute pitch plus one Google slide. And each shark will have 2 minutes to offer feedback and suggestions. We are going to be pretty strict about the timing, and even though we don't have a hook or a reel, that's right, or a gong, you may hear this sound, but hopefully you won't hear the sound. And of course, nobody wants to hear this sound. So that is going to be your cue to kind of wrap it up and get back onto the boat because it's time to go.
Do not be that person.
Exactly, exactly. Now we want to welcome everyone who's here in the audience to contribute your ideas, reactions, as well as resources into the chat. And even for our sharks, if there's something that you forgot to mention, please put it into the chat. We will be providing a written summary for our participants, for our people presenting today, to make sure that they get as much feedback as possible and so on. So we really want to help them and support them throughout this process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gail.
Great. Thank you, Helen. And so first up, I'm going to be very brief with my introductions because I want people to have as much time to do their pitches. We have Samantha Blevins, who's going to be talking to us about the Innovator Cafe. Take it away, Samantha.
All right, greetings sharks and fellow ePortfolio enthusiasts. I'm Samantha Blevins from the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning at Radford University. I am asking for your support of my project, the Innovator Cafe, adding intentional reflection to our faculty community. The Innovator Cafe is a faculty community of scholarly dialogue. Our participants meet 4 times a semester and explore innovative teaching and learning techniques through the use of a common reader. conversational experiences, and peer support. The cafe has been meeting since spring 2015 and will continue this fall with James Lang's book, Small Teaching. Our faculty members need time and space to explore the literature of teaching and learning, to unpack really big ideas and examine how those big ideas can meaningfully relate to their own work. In addition, scholars within different disciplines can derive value from cross-disciplinary dialogue, which leads to the construction of new shared meaning and practice for teaching and learning. The Innovator Cafe also gives participants a path to further explore implications for scholarship, teaching, and research through our multiple university-supported avenues, including preparing a proposal for internal Sea Grant programs, applying for faculty development grants, and/or designing a lesson or module to be implemented in a future course. Innovator Cafe completers are also invited to compete in our very own Shark Tank competition, where 3 to 5 $500 internal Sea Grants are awarded each year. Often all projects end up being funded by our campus sharks in one way or another. While reflection on their own practice happens throughout these meetings and dialogues, we have not tried to make these reflections more intentional or visible for our faculty. The incorporation of intentional reflection as part of the professional self can help our faculty make sense of their experiences, where they are within Radford University, as well as where they want to go. Reflective practice can also help when solving complex problems, like COVID-19. Examining a problem from many viewpoints, including the self, will be encouraged. The engagement in reflective practice gives a holistic experience to our faculty. This holistic experience can bring greater satisfaction and unity to themselves, as well as greater empathy between themselves and their students. So in addition to their own self-reflection, I will be encouraging them to include intentional reflection for their students within their courses and programs, helping make our campus a more reflective place to live, work, and learn. With your support, I plan to implement intentional reflection into this community, setting time aside during each meeting to allow faculty to answer reflective prompts on their own in any way that they prefer. Thank you for your time and for letting me be part of the very first AAEEBL Shark Tank.
So thank you, Samantha. We're now going to turn it over to our sharks, but first I want to just make a little statement that in Finding Dory, fish are friends, not food. So as you give your shark feedback, keep that in mind to give those little fishies the best that you can without taking too big a bite out of them. Also, if you have ideas that are coming up, if you're participants, please feel free to use that chat to give Samantha as much feedback as she can get. Jerry, let's have Jerry up first shark in.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much, Samantha, for all the effort that you're putting in here and creating a forum for faculty dialogue and reflection is very important, not just for solving immediate problems, but really their long-term viability of an active member of your community. So good work there. And I think you've used a few words a number of times about visualization, you know, having people see each other's viewpoints. And so what you may want to do is build in actual visualization of the concepts during your reflective process. Something simple like getting a bunch of flip chart paper, sticking them on walls after you have a dialogue, say, okay, how do you see things? And also, I think what's important to also ask someone else to say, how would other people see this differently? How would your students view it? How would your department chair view it, et cetera, along those lines, so you can get the reflections be part of your process. Because I'll say one of the challenges of engaging anyone in a reflective process, if they think it's an after the fact work, then it's a burden to put on them. If you build reflection into the process and help capture ideas, and particularly visually, then you can create a gallery of different models of how to conceptualize things. So that's really my point to add on here to help support what you're doing, is move from words to pictures, because then pictures can be 1,000 words in a reflective process. So I'll pass it all off to the next person.
Yes, and next up we have John.
Yes, thank you for letting me be a participant here, and I really enjoyed your presentation talking about your Innovator Cafe. And all faculty members have good intentions. It's always sometimes hard to follow through on those. A little trick we've been using now that so many people are using Zoom is to check that your audio and video is working. I have people do a simple recording before they start a meeting. And then at the end of it, they make a recording to reflect. And one of the functions of Zoom is you could get a transcript. So I think getting a habit of reflection, rather than making it so intentional, but just something that just happens naturally would be fun. And I'd want to ditto with Jerry. I think the idea of written reflections are great, but just snapshots, whether it even be a capture on an iPhone or a little simple video that they record, or even scratched up drawing. I think we need to expand what we mean by reflection about what we're doing in terms of our teaching and learning. But other than that, I think your 15 faculty are lucky to have an Innovators Cafe where you're located.
Thank you.
So next shark, Allison.
Well, I concur with Jerry and John. I'm just amazed at what you're offering for your organisation. I think it's an amazing, I call it a community practice. Community practice have strength when there's a real need. So I think some of it might be focusing in on, the individual, that what's the pain point for these individuals at any point in time. And you come across some of it may be promotional stuff. Hopefully my audio is coming through okay. It's saying I've got unstable internet. So look, I think you've got an amazing community practice. From my experience in the portfolio approach is that the future is always going to know what about the past. So being able to capture it. So Jerry talked about, and I think John did talk about this visual thing, but I find when I, by stealth, include reflective practice, even by getting people to speak out loud about it, the light bulbs go on for people, and that kind of, that's where the value add is. But if you're trying to get a hook, which I think was what you might have used in your, or one of you's used in there, is about, well, what is it that they want to do maybe a little bit better, and get them to really focus in on what is important for them, and it's usually their students. What is it they want to do a little bit better for their students? And if you can get them to focus in on that, then there's a real need for them, and it kind of happens, as we've said, not intentionally. Well, it happens intentionally, but I believe it happens by stealth.
Wonderful, wonderful. And last but not least, Shark Eddie.
Hello, everyone. And Samantha, great to hear what you're up to these days across the river at Radford University. Love the faculty learning community model that you've got here, community of practice that you're doing. It reminds me a lot of some of the good work of Milton Cox, which I'm sure you're familiar with at this point. One thing that I think is exceptional about the model that you were describing is that there's an expectation of an outcome or product at the end of the experience. And often you hear about faculty learning communities sort of not being able to go the distance for the entire semester or the entire academic year. And it's often because there's not necessarily a real clear sense of purpose or goal. So hearing you describe the elements that you had in place that ensures that you've got hooks in your fish to stay in the boat. How about that, Helen? There were 3 jokes, 3 puns in the same sentence. So really excited by the model that you've got. The one thing that I kept thinking of is just like, how does this change given your usual model, given that we're going into such an interesting academic year where I imagine a lot of the FLC experience will be mediated by technology. And I think, of course, being able to capture a lot of reflections like you've already charting to do makes a really good sort of companion to the mediated experience. But excited by your FLC. Good luck.
Great, wonderful. So we're now ready for our next pitch, which is going to be Steve Bookman, and he's going to be talking to us about Inclusive ePortfolio Showcase. Take it away, Stephen.
Thank you, and thank you, Sharks, for listening to me and giving me advice. I teach at Pace University in the English department, and part of what I do is teach a class called Writing Across the Disciplines. Although this is like a freshman class, I treat it very literally, and I teach students with my ePortfolio assignment, how to define audience through demographics and psychometrics. I teach them social media rules and the First Amendment through various assignments. And I do a lot of document design theory and document designing in itself with the students. My ePortfolio assignment has 3 parts, and I want to add a 4th part, which really bothers me in some ways because I'm leaving some students out. The first part is they create an audience profile sheet, which is going to be for recruiters and employers. Next, they would do a LinkedIn account, and then they would create an ePortfolio using all the design theory and everything we've talked about in class. What I would like to add is a ePortfolio showcase. And this, not every student wants to do an ePortfolio or sees the value in it and doesn't put the time into it. And I thought this way would make it easier in some ways for students to want to do it. I would give them extra credit for the top 3. I have 20 students in the class, and it's hard for me to do to have all the students showcase. So I think I would like to choose the top 3. My questions are, how can I make it inclusive for every student? Because not every student is willing to do it for whatever reason, whether it's something from their own country that's going to stop them if they're an international student, or if it's something to do with their jobs where they're going for a job, which I've had students that couldn't be on social media. Is it better for me to just do one contest for those who are willing to showcase and ones who don't want everyone to see their ePortfolios? And I'm just trying to make this part as logistical as possible and inclusive to everybody. And this is something that I've tried to do, but I've never had the backing to do it, so I'm trying this myself. So thank you for listening, and I hope that I can get some good feedback.
Great. So now we start moving into our sharks, and as my background shows, as we get all of this feedback and the waves lap over us, we enjoy the flow and know that Helen Chen is standing by taking notes, and you will get a summary of the feedback that you get. But first shark up this time is John. Is John muted?
He's muted.
You think I know how to use that? Stephen, thank you for a great presentation. And this one is really exciting to me because I think anytime there's an ePortfolio process with students in their freshman year, you really are doing a service for them that will serve them throughout their whole career at your university. And I think the contest part does drive a number of students, but not all the students. So I think one thing you might look at is you talk about teaching personal branding and then designing a portfolio, and to the extent that they all could have a public one. I like to work with students on first identifying their own personal identity. It might be something that they might only share, figure out on themselves, maybe share with you as a professor because you're guiding them, and use that personal identity portfolio as something that then they could share what part of their identity they're willing to make public. And it may not be everything or may not be anything for some students who have some challenges, but at least you're giving them a document that has a value beyond what may be applied into your contest. But I think activities like this do help make the portfolio sticky. And I think having them public or visible, at least to the fellow students, does increase the quality of the portfolios that students do, rather than portfolios that might only be shared between you as a professor and the student doing a class assignment. So I wish you luck, and there are some resources about portfolio contests. We've seen a number of them done with ePortfolio Minnesota. There were some done at Washington. So I'll try to find the links to some of those ePortfolio contest metrics that they used in scoring ePortfolios.
So thank you, John. Let's go. Next up is the shark Allison.
So again, I agree with what John said in that, look, I think what you're offering is amazing and it's a great concept, but and everybody needs this process. Everybody needs to understand how to behave and represent themselves online, okay? We've kind of been online now for about maybe 15, 17 years. It feels a little bit old hat, but it's still really new in the history of human beings. And from my observation, very anecdotally, generally people aren't representing themselves too healthily in social media. So I think it's a really important thing what you're doing there. However, the concept of everybody wanting to be kind of explicit in the social media world is not, it's just not a given. So I have social media profiles, very selected. I do as minimal as I can, and it's mainly about around a business and very little about who I am as an individual for very, very private and personal reasons. And so I think you should be encouraging people to have some sort of digital profile, perhaps, but not dictate that it has to be LinkedIn. Because if you've got international students, it may be that it's WhatsApp or WeChat or somewhere else that's more appropriate to their identity, or it's the industry that they might want to get into as well. That LinkedIn's not appropriate. So I work with a lot of tradespeople, and LinkedIn's not appropriate, but if you're a professional, then LinkedIn's fantastic. So perhaps if you can link it back to the industry or the profession for which they want to get into. But I agree with John in that it has to be a choice thing, that not everybody wants to be out there and be public.
So thank you, Allison, sorry, and on to Eddie.
Hey, Steve, thanks for sharing your interesting pedagogical challenges that you're putting to your students and what you're teaching in your classes. This is, it's really had a lot of juices and memories flowing for me. I used to teach a master's level survey research course, and we did poster sessions at the end of that experience, you know, and it was a course requirement. And I've thought about the notion of those that are willing versus those that are able. And I think there are often students who might not want to do, you know, a public speaking element of a course, or don't want to do the poster session. And often they don't necessarily have terribly valid reasons for not wanting to do it. But it sounds like you do have some students who have very legitimate reasons for why they might not be able to put things in an online setting. I wonder, you know, thinking about the things that you're teaching within your class, thinking about personal brand and the like, might there be an alternative assignment that has ePortfolio like elements? Like, for instance, you know, students might use Photoshop or InDesign or some HTML page creator that never puts things online. They just sort of have a folder with files on their desktop where they're actually building a portfolio like project, and then during the presentation part they could share it from their laptop, but it's never actually on the web, and that way everyone could participate. Of course, the design tools and the skill set that students would need to have to be able to build things on their own on their desktop, rather than using a free platform or, you know, any of the ePortfolio platforms that have templates already in place, make those to have some clear advantages. So I'm still working through the calculus of how to make this available for all students, but it seems like there might be a thin pathway where students could build stuff on their own computer and just never have it online.
Great, thank you very much, Eddie. And finally, we've got Jerry in this round.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And I think a very important element of what you just described is having students learn how to give voice to themselves. And nowadays, if that's an important and challenging situation that our students are in, and many of them have not been supported in giving voice to their own ideas, to their own identity, to their own goals and wishes of how they would like to live. So creating that environment that allows them different methodologies to give voice and practice that in a safe environment is very important. So thinking about your audience profile, very important. thinking about how they want to represent their idea is very important. And I think what you can do is use the kind of the diversity of the needs and circumstances that your students are in as a teaching moment to say, what are the ways that you can give voice in complex situations, and have them help design the ways that they can demonstrate their ability to give voice to their identity and what they want in multiple strategies, and really allow you to have not specific kind of elements of what constitutes an ePortfolio, but how do they fulfill the principles of communicating to an audience in different ways, and let the students explain to one another why I don't want to do it for XYZ reasons. And here's a way that I can help kind of represent myself in a way that helps me move forward in a social community. So I think you got a great problem. Keep on going at it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And so without further ado, we're going to move on to our next pitch, in which Elise Helm is going to be telling us about owning the ePortfolio experience. Sounds like it might connect with what we've just been talking about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So at the University of Puget Sound, we frame much of our ePortfolio work through the lens of storytelling. Our hope is that through reflection, students will know, own, and articulate their unique narrative. It starts at orientation, where first-year students engage in an interactive workshop rooted in reflective practice, during which they process the experiences, skills, and expectations they bring with them to the university. Before ePortfolios are even mentioned, the students share one story using the reflective model, what, so what, now what. Tell us what you did, what made that experience meaningful to you, and what does it mean for you as you move forward. Then students pick a page or two of their ePortfolio to begin telling their story. Then as students progress through both the curriculum and co-curriculum, they may encounter additional moments to add a chapter to their story. An ePortfolio developed in an art class or first-year seminar can highlight some of their academic pursuits, while maybe an ePortfolio from an internship program might explore some professional interests. We're currently halfway through our ePortfolio rollout across our campus. So this year, first year through junior level students will have ePortfolio accounts with our platform, although any interested student is provided an account. Through collaboration with academic advising, student affairs, career and employment services, as well as with individual faculty, we actually have cultivated ePortfolio structures in courses, programs, and departments all over campus. Ideally, each instance incorporates that same reflective practice, but the structure of that work is defined primarily by the faculty or staff member. Our current focus is to cultivate students' ePortfolio use beyond these structured instances. As our initial users enter the second half of their Puget Sound journey, we hope they will continue to add to their ePortfolio collections and even curate those into showcase ePortfolios. We think that this work should benefit and serve the students first and foremost. So to support those efforts, we prepared a menu of resources, including workshops and individual appointments. Another resource is a template library with single-page templates that can be woven together into countless configurations based on the student's inclination. Each template has prompts that harken back to that what, so what, now what structure that was introduced during orientation. Our hope is to build a community of individuals who are, as has been mentioned throughout this conference, in practice with their ePortfolio development. The first drafts of our students' academic, personal, and professional stories are actively being written. As students near graduation, we want to empower them to share their stories in the ways that they want with the audiences that they want. Whether curating blogs about their COVID-19 experience, showcasing theater productions that they've directed, networking with a potential employer, or articulating the value of a liberal arts education, we want them to have the resources they need to tell their stories. We want to encourage authentic, self-driven ePortfolio use because that meaning-making process supports lifelong learning. I thank you for your time, and I'm eager for you to share your advice and experience supporting self-driven folio thinking on your campuses.
Thank you so much. And so as we move into our next round of Shark feedback, remember, maybe you might think you're a fish, but maybe you're a shark in training, also known as baby shark. First up for feedback is Allison.
Thank you, Carl. So, Elise, I think you're asking the $64 million question that we're all searching for, and some of us who've been playing in this space for a while, been looking for this answer. You know, how do we get kind of this self-directed learning, and is the portfolio the kind of framework where we put it around? But I just hearing, I think what you're doing, so I should acknowledge first up, I think what you're offering at your university is just incredible, and I do have ePortfolio MB and what you're offering there, so it's some amazing stuff that's happening there. But what I keep hearing is a kind of there's an ePortfolio product and an ePortfolio process, and often people get really hung up on this product, that there's a thing that, you know, show me. So I've been doing this now for about 12 years, and often people are like, show me. And for me, the real value, and from my own experience, the real value is the process, is the ePortfolio process that you're trying to establish through the fantastic artifacts that you're enabling people to actually offer. And so I think, you know, that focus on the ePortfolio approach, certainly the products that you're offering are amazing. Again, I heard the word written a lot, and it may be just an unintentional word, but I'm thinking, is there, if I think of people who are quite dynamic on the web, they don't just have writing. I know writing is important, and it's easier to embed in an academic field, but if you think about video and things that people might do on social media and so on. But I think the final bit of my 2 cents worth are that you are trying to kind of perhaps again establish maybe a community of practice, maybe those people who understand the value of reflective learning, self-directed learning, and bring them along on the journey. And I think when I read your pitch before you actually spoke, I wrote something down about we've got an ever-changing world. So if you're trying to look for this hook, is, well, you know, that you have to continue to be reflective beyond university, beyond the assessment, because each and every day, you know, I wake up quite a few days at the beginning of this year, so for us it was March, trying to figure out how am I going to deal with COVID-19 and how I'm going to help others deal with it. So we're constantly in this reflective mode throughout life. So let me wrap up by saying amazing work, what you're doing. And if you can find the magical wand to help everybody be self-directed learners, please share that. But I think what you're doing is a really good concept.
So the advice is to make magic. Eddie, next.
I'm going to give a lot of praise and just a little bit of advice, just because I'm looking at this and it's like, this is the exemplar in my mind, sort of the holy grail of how ePortfolio should be rolled out. And I often sort of lament the fragmentation of the curriculum that we have in higher education. You've got the major, you've got the gen ed experience, you've got co-curricular, we've also got those high impact practices, internships, experiential learning, things like that. And then there's the variety of other experiences, students working on campus, students, you know, working outside of the university. There's also just life experiences, students taking care of ill parents or grandparents, things like that. And I love that students are doing collection by semester. They're drawing all of these various experiences together and in acts of integration. I mean, where else at your university or at any university does that kind of integration take place? I mean, that to me is, again, the holy grail of ePortfolios. So I think you're so far down the road. This looks fantastic. The one recommendation that I might have that speaks to sort of how you might get students and faculty engaged, a decade ago, and Sam from Radford University may remember this when she and I were both at Virginia Tech, we had Apple Computer paid students to be advocates on campus, and they were basically sort of like roaming guerrilla advocates for everything Apple. And so they were paid like, I don't know, 15 hours a week, and they had offices in our office suite, and they basically would help anyone that needed help with anything Apple, but they were also paid to go. And, you know, when they're downtown at dinner, they should be talking about Apple loudly, trying to engage people in conversation. And they had narratives at the end of each week. These are the things that I did. And it might be an interesting approach to have like a dozen student advocates. And maybe they're paid, but maybe they're on internships, and so they have a title associated with it, and their role is to roam the Puget Sound hillside and be an advocate for ePortfolios. So one thought, but just lots of praise.
Thank you.
Okay, great advocates. And now Jerry.
I'll echo the praise. This is just amazing what you've thought through and what you're supporting. Just terrific, and hats off to you. And I just agree too with what Eddie just said and Allison said. Now, I think that just a few comments here. I think what you're doing by providing templates can really help people think about what they need to do, not with just a blank page, but with some prompts that will help them make it easier for them to capture, what they need to do. So that's, I just reinforce that issue of templates. Now, you've emphasized storytelling. And I think one of the challenges we have with students in the way education occurs is they are not really often see themselves as the main character of their own story. They go into a class and their job is to satisfy the main character, the faculty member in the class. And so I have to do something to get an A or a B or whatever it is. And I think, how do you build this to say, you know what, you student, you are the most important character. Your circumstances are changing from year to year. And the challenges you're facing will cause your character to develop and change. So I think really emphasizing the importance of the student as the continuity throughout all this curriculum, I think is really important. And if you can use those ePortfolios to reinforce the importance of their voice and how they need to learn to express it, so they really get the intrinsic value of representing themselves. So just great work, congratulations, and I hope you continue to be successful in what you're doing.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's hear from John.
It's always hard to be down in the list because everyone has given so many good feedback already. But again, hats off to you. I think it's a wonderful job here, and you've done some interesting things. You've been dealing with the issue of should they be required or should they be optional? And I like your idea of an opt-in approach. But if you're going to do an opt-in approach around ePortfolios with no established requirements, then it's really a requirement that you reduce the barriers to get people to use them, to do them, to make it convenient for people to do it. So even though there's not a requirement, they want to. And it looks like you've really started developing some of those things in terms of your templates and your guides. But I think, as Jerry mentioned, the trip from a first year student to a graduating senior is an interesting journey and story. And I found in a lot of the portfolios that we worked with across the whole academic term, a lot of the students didn't value some of the portfolio work that they did at the beginning and didn't want to share it as much at the end. So the idea of owning that experience over the whole 4 years and making it be a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then it's just, how do you get places for students to be able to share that story, both in formal and informal settings? So you talk about your orientation, you talk about your courses, you have your departments doing it, but maybe you need to do something like a story night or a story slam or a portfolio slam at each year where students have a place to be able to share their portfolios. But other than that, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. It's great ideas. Thank you so much.
That's wonderful. So Helen's going to move us along. And last but not least, we've got Kate, Brian, and Tyne, and they have the title that has the most alliteration and is the hardest to pronounce: Portfolios for the Precarious Pedagogy Postgraduate Research.
Thank you, Gail. Hi, everyone. Our team, before we begin, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and the great white shark-infested waters from which we're joining you today. These are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders, past and present. I present our pitch today to you with two of my esteemed colleagues, Brian Martin and Dr. Kate Coleman. I'm Dr. Tyne Sumner. We are three passionate researchers, educators, learning technology specialists and collaborators from the University of Melbourne. And we span the areas of literary studies, graduate education, art-based pedagogical practice, educational technology, and many, many more. So to our ideas. What if I told you all that every graduate researcher, or told every graduate researcher that most of the skills they need for their future employment, either inside or outside of academia, were already intrinsic to their research degree? Would they believe me? Probably not. These invaluable capabilities include such things as project management, critical thinking, technical skills, and the ability to conduct analysis, all sought after in a wide range of jobs. Yet, despite the obviousness of these claims, today the career pathway for graduate researchers, PhD students, is as nebulous and as shifting as the constellation you see on our slide here. The word constellation comes from the Latin constellatio, meaning a set of stars. We propose a model to support the careers of graduate researchers during and post-candidature that mirrors the dispersed stars of this galaxy: agile, relational, and dynamic. Understanding, supporting, and showcasing the intellectual and social fabric of the postgraduate experience, we argue, needs a digital ecology that visualizes multiple career pathways simultaneously, each envisaged out of a curated ecosystem that, through logical and intelligent curation, tells a compelling story about an individual's capabilities and achievements.
The orbit of the graduate researcher is unpredictable, unknowable, but nonetheless elliptical, with the ever-present tug of tenure's gravity keeping us close when we often feel we are distant objects. One way of comprehending and constructing such an ecology of cosmic proportions is through inhabiting the experience of being a postgraduate researcher, one where Heideggerian notions of being in this world with past selves, current cares, and imagined futures collide through time with the Deweyan world of the aesthetic experience of occupations as ways of being, doing, and knowing. So as we map the many cares and occupations of graduate researchers, we may peer through the void and begin to resolve a galactic web of digital platforms through which we undertake and story our occupations as teachers, professionals, activists, scholars, and writers. This is an ecology of care, one where the aesthetic experience matters.
Our constellation is sustainable, agile, responsive, and relational. It's supportive of the graduate research during and post-candidature. 20 years ago, Seeley Brown suggested we need a learning ecology model that is dynamic, diverse, self-organizing, adaptive, and conscious of the fragility of digital ecosystems. A digital ecology and collection curation culture that honors the fluid nature of being and knowing in a trans and cross-disciplinary space is reified here. We propose a digital portfolio ecology of authentic multiple sites connected and responsive to futures possible, preferably plausible, to support and develop multiple professional sites and identities needed in this precarious world more than ever. We build on Professor Martin Nakata's cultural interface here, presenting a cultural digital turn that sees the need for the intersection of digital, different knowledge systems and systems of thought to develop new practices and pedagogies. As Nakata suggests, the online environment has reconstituted the balance between visual, oral, textual modes of knowing and presenting information in a way that supports cultural perspectives and enables the sharing and telling of stories. Thank you.
That's wonderful. And we've been under the sea, we've been out in the sky, and now we're coming home in the home stretch with Eddie Shark first giving our feedback.
Lots of interesting ideas here. Thanks for sharing this notion. I'm thinking about the whole related concept of self-authorship and choice. You know, you've got this constellation of different options, and what are the processes that students and faculty and candidates might go through as they make appropriate selections. I know that I sometimes feel a little overwhelmed with the variety of professional platforms that are available to me. And I feel like I've made some strategic decisions about I know that this seems to have a growth trajectory, but I don't have the capacity to go down that particular road and keep up with the other platforms that I've gotten. So I guess I see sort of like stars coming on the horizon and then some stars disappearing from the horizon. And, you know, I make those choices. I think we all make those choices. But I just wonder about a framework or an algorithm guidance that we might provide to those that are becoming professionals in higher education or really in any field to help them navigate and make the kinds of decisions that they would need to make about which platforms they might wish to join. Just one of the variables that I think we all should be considering is just sort of like notions of what each of these platforms might do with our data, and how transparent is that, and then if you make a decision and something is placed in a specific platform, what then happens to that data? So I guess I think this is something that we're all grappling with, all professionals are grappling with, is how do we fit ourselves into this constellation and make choices among those constellations? I think that we all need assistance and guidance for making those choices. And so that's what's exciting about what you've put together here. Is I would love to see the next piece that helps people make the appropriate decisions for their careers.
So thank you, Eddie. Jerry Shark.
Okay, thank you too for this. And I'll tell you, you really got me to think about some core issues about us as a profession. And what we do in education. And I think the first thing is, I think you're right on the money that there are skills that are developed in a graduate educational process that are broadly applicable to so many disciplines. And I think some of this is, as we, in a sense, I'll use the metaphor of constellations that you have here. Those lines connecting the stars are really in our imagination. And the way that we have to learn to recognize skills, that knowledge that I have, is often the syntax of other language helps tie these pieces together. So language of project management and change management actually applies and can think metaphorically align with research skills. So I think some of this is getting researchers to learn other language to connect the dots in a way that other people can see it with language. So if I had to say what aspect of ePortfolios can be used to help a researcher kind of imagine the connections that other people can understand, I think it's going to be helping learning the language of systems engineering or project management or change management that might be very helpful. So that come back to a point of those might be templates that might be helpful that people can adopt as they're developing in that profession. So
thank you.
That's my thought there.
Okay. So thank you very much, Jerry, and let's hear it from John.
Well, thank you for a wonderful presentation. What struck me about this is that this current pandemic that we're in, one of my exercises was talking to some friends who are currently just going into finishing their PhD programs, a niece and a nephew. And I thought back, well, what would I be thinking right now if I was just launching my professional career, having just done my research and getting my doctorate? And what was the constellation looking like then to get your career going versus what the opportunities are here? Clearly, we're in a time that we really don't know what's going to be happening in the future to higher education. And probably this constellation of resources of how you present yourself and how you find other collaborators. I think one of the interesting things that I've seen happening in the last 6 months is that groups are getting together and collaborating, and distance barriers and time barriers are breaking down. So I've been seeing a number of groups that have become Zoom families that in a traditional academic setting would not have connected because of the way institutions work, the way your career promotion works, how going after grants works in the traditional model. All those things are changing so much right now that I actually really think studying this galaxy that you're looking at and figuring out what the new career will be like. I think academics are going to have a very different career path because of this event. And I think your graduate students, as they launch their careers, are probably the most motivated to try to figure out how to navigate it. And I think one of them will be documenting their learning and presenting it and sharing it. And my 2 minutes are up.
Thank you so much, John. And Allison.
So this is an amazing concept, and if you've ever worked with Kate, I haven't had the chance to work with Simon and time before, but I've worked with Kate for a while, and she's an amazing innovative thinker and educator. So I think there's a couple of things I'm trying to see in this concept, and one is that there's a potential parallel between a research degree and this digital portfolio concept that you're talking about. So this is a futuristic thing. But I'm also hearing the word agile, and I also understand the pain points that Kate and her team are trying to address in that in Australia, a lot of academics and researchers at the moment, education higher has been cut through the pandemic, and so lots of people are wondering if they have a job, or if they will have a job in the near future. So there's the agility where something happens to happen now, and so there's two kind of things that need to be thought about if you're going to take this to another level. I'm sure you've already thought this through. You did mention things like the skills that you develop: project management, technical, critical thinking, and these are transferable skills, but they need to be contextualized. So there needs to be skills built around, well, how do I transfer these skills into different situations? And perhaps the critical thinking comes through that. And the other thing you talked about was curation, and curation is a skill that you need to develop. And I'm not sure, you didn't mention that as a key skill, so maybe that's something that needs to be thought about. If you're going to get the agility now, you need to reduce the fear. At the moment, I'm a bit better now, but in March, I was living in Maslow's hierarchy of needs at the bottom, like just trying to survive every day. And we know lots of people are still doing that now. And so how do we reduce the fear that will allow them to be agile and to see the concept of a portfolio career, which is what I'm seeing potentially could be happening out of this concept. So I think, as always, an amazing concept. I'd really love to keep in touch, Kate, and know and support this in any way that we can do it. But I think there's two things you need to think about: what you need to do now to help people who are still in bottom Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of their career, and then what can we implement and drive forward to help career researchers from now into the future. Thank you.
Great, this is wonderful. I have a few words. First, I just want to congratulate all of our participants, as we were talking about in the session earlier today, how brave it is to stand up and do a pitch. And so even if you're a goldfish underneath the water, you're a shark up on top. And we really want to thank that. And we also want to thank our sharks for being so generous with their thinking and their time. I've also seen a lot of great stuff going on in the chat, and that's wonderful. I thought I'd spend 1 minute, though, going a little meta on this. Shark Tank, while it's playful, it's also a new way to demonstrate transfer of learning and evidence of impact in a conference. So as Ruben Puentedura noted, our first instinct when we've got this technology around us is to do some kind of substitution thing. We're just sort of cramming what we did before into the, into this new environment. So instead of trying to replicate what we did on ground, a 3-day conference, right? Just trying to replicate. We took a 3-day conference, and with Kevin and Helen and Candace and Tracy and other people, I'm sure I'm leaving off the list, I'm sorry, but re-envisioned it into a month-long event. And what happens when it becomes a month-long event? All of a sudden, there's a little bit of a time and space to sort of think transformatively. There's a little bit of time to sort of say, hey, we can do more iterations, we can start to apply. We're actually coming to this from our home territories, and so we can be having conversations with people that we wouldn't. If it was a 3-day conference, any work we did like that would be taking away from our time with each other. But it didn't take away from our time with each other. And so guess what we were able to do? Participants are able to begin to apply what they're learning in their contexts while the conference is still underway. We're able to have these kinds of conversations, which are wonderful. And also this allows us as conference organizers to see the impact of the event. So we're going beyond the evaluations that say the rooms were too cold, the food was great, the rooms were too hot. Going beyond that to really having some more direct evidence of learning, that of how what is the meaning that you're making of this conference, and how is that going to connect back to your practice. So thank you so much for all that you are doing to help us understand the meaning that you're making of this conference in relation to your practice.
Thank you so much, Gail. I just want to again echo Gail's gratitude, especially to all of our presenters as well as our sharks for taking the time and being willing to dive into these uncharted waters to figure out, what's something new that we can do, and also what we can do to leverage the technology we have with us. And really want to especially express thanks to John for helping us navigate, especially the Zoom technology. I did want to talk briefly about sort of next steps. And again, on Friday, we will be announcing the winners at the AAEEBL Showcase at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern. We do continue to have a very active Slack workspace community, and I would encourage everyone to please go ahead and sign up there as well. And again, this is something new. We've never tried this before, so we would welcome any sort of feedback and suggestions. You can feel free to email me with any comments, and and if this is something you might like to try yourselves, for a future conference or on your own campuses, we're happy to share everything that we've learned through this process. So with that, Gail and I are certainly very grateful that, and Sam observed this too, we did not have to play the Jaws music, which is awesome. So great job, everybody, staying on time. And so we'll go ahead and just wrap up here. Thank you again for your participation, and especially for your contributions. And we'll certainly leave the room open and hang out a bit if anyone would like to ask any additional questions, provide any other feedback. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you.